Hello, hello, this is The Hidden Truth, the TV talk show for the thinking American. My name is Aage and I'm the host. Tonight, we're going to talk about some of the greatest mysteries of all times. And I got a great guest with me to talk about it, me. I am going to show you some evidence to the fact that there's some really goofy stuff going on in the area of the North Pole. There is also evidence to the fact that there are huge caverns inside the Earth. More than one place. In fact, many different places inside the crust of the Earth. But more so, what we're going to talk about tonight is the fact that Earth may be hollow. There may be a huge cavern inside of it. And I know I lost a few of you right there. But don't worry too much. By the time you are done watching the evidence for that I'm going to show you, you're probably going to be just as puzzled as many of us others. Because I have a NASA print that'll blow you away, that'll prove exactly what I'm talking about. And, you know, this story is about something going on in the area of the North Pole that's been going on for hundreds of years. Especially if you are up in the northern part of Europe, northern Norway, Sweden, Finland, Greenland, or northern part of Canada. Even in Yukon, Alaska. They got those stories, and they're coming down from the Eskimos. The Eskimos are saying that there are people living in the north. And there are sometimes strange things that can be seen in the sky. We are all familiar with Aurora Borealis. Well, that Aurora Borealis, that is that light that is flickering across the sky. It goes from blue to green and all kinds of different colors. But there is another, call it northern light. If you get far enough north, in fact, in Europe, if you get north of Spitsbergen, you can see it. Sometimes at the very northern tip, the North Cape in Norway, you can see it. Especially on cold winter days when there's haze. For some reason, that seems to bring it out. And that is that you can see the northern light dancing across the sky, and we know what that is. That's got nothing to do with anything but dust coming in from space and burning up in the electric field around the planet. But there's another northern light that is stationary. It is constant. It comes from here and goes straight up. And that is very faint. It is kind of like yellowish, more like a little brownish, yellowish color. And nobody can figure out what this is. Most people won't even talk about it. And that just might be coming out through a hole at the North Pole. A hole in the crust of the Earth showing a light from coming inside, coming out. Well, there is a reason for it. It's got to be a reason for it. That is one explanation. And I'm all ears for any other explanations. I haven't heard any yet. Before I get into the pictures, I want to talk about a man that did a lot of research in that area. His name is Admiral Byrd. He was Rear Admiral. Admiral Byrd was an Air Force officer. And Admiral is about as far up the ladder as you can get. And I have a picture of that Admiral Byrd. Is a handsome-looking man. So let's show the picture. And besides that, he went to the very northern part of the American continent. And he got in a small twin-engine military airplane. This was back in 1947. Him and a navigator and another guy went up there, and they wanted to fly into the polar region for exploratory something or other. I wasn't really quite clear why they went there, but they did. In fact, the records from that flight is still about 50 years later almost, or actually more than that, classified. Does that make sense? Why should a simple flight into a polar region that is supposed to be nothing at be classified for 50 years? You answer that one. And here we can see the picture of the aircraft that he was flying into the polar region. If I also can see it on the monitor in the studio, that would be wonderful, so I can see how far along we're going. And now he flew into the polar region, and with that particular airplane will be doing somewhere around 160 to 180 miles an hour. It is a slow airplane. And on his trip up there, he wrote down in his log, about every few minutes or so he had an entry in the log. And I have a copy or a transcript from that trip, and it is quite extraordinary, because he encountered something in the polar region that will blow you away when you hear it. In fact, it is called the Diary of Admiral Byrd on his trip to the North Pole. It is not quite a diary, it is a transcript from the log, the aircraft log. And I'm going to read some of it, and I'm going to comment as I go through with it, because this here is going to be something that you want to hear. It was brought forward by Dr. William Bernard, PhD. And he made a comment when he came back. He called it the land beyond the pole. And the exploration flight over the North Pole is what they call it. And let's see here, where does it start? And he says here that Admiral Byrd, February and March, it's March 1947, the exploration flight over the North Pole. I must write this diary in secrecy and obscurity. It concerns my Arctic flight of the 19th day of February in the year of 1947. There comes a time when the rationality of men must fade into insignificance, and one must accept the inevitable of the truth. I am not at liberty to disclose the following document at this writing. Perhaps it shall never see light of day or public scrutiny, but I must do my duty and record here for all to read one day. In a world of greed and exploitation of certain of mankind can no longer suppress that which is truth. And here it starts. Flight log, base camp Arctic 1 on 19th of February 1947. 600 hours. All preparations are complete for our flight north, and we are airborne with full tanks at 6:10 hours. This is all military time now. 6:20 hours. Fuel mixture on starboard engine seems too rich. Adjustment have been made on the Pratt & Whitney, are running smooth. 7:30 hours. Radio check with base camp, all is well and radio reception normal. 7:40 hours. Note slight oil leak on starboard engine, oil pressure is normal. 800 hours. Slight turbulence noted from easterly direction at altitude of 2,320 feet, correction to 1,700 feet, no further turbulence. but tailwind increases, slight adjustment in throttle controls, airborne performing, and everything is well. 8:15 hours, radio check with base camp, situation normal. What he's doing here, he's writing in the log everything that is happening in relation to flying the airplane. And this flight is going to bring him inside the center of the Earth. Stand by and you will find out how it happens. Vast ice and snow below. Note coloration of yellowish nature and dispense in a linear pattern. Altering course for a better examination of this color pattern below, noting a reddish or purple colors also. We circle this area 2 full turns and return to assigned compass heading. Position check made against a base camp and relay information concerning coloration of the ice and snow to base camp. 9:10 hours. Both magnetic and gyro compasses are starting to fail and wobble. Now that is important. When you get into the polar region, the magnetic compass basically become worthless because something called dip, because the north end tips down towards the pole, so it touches the casing of the compass. But how the gyro compass, which is not affected by magnetic, started to wobble, that is a puzzle. Okay. It must, okay, where we go here? Instrumentation. Take bearing with sun compass, yet all seems well. The controls are seemingly slow to respond and have sluggish quality, but there is no indication of icing. 9:15 hours. It is in the distance, it is what appears to be mountains. 9:45 hours. 29 minutes has elapsed flight time from the first sight of the mountains. It is no illusion. They are mountains and are consisting of a small range that I have never seen before. See, this is really strange because mountains in the area of the North Pole, how could that happen? Very strange. And it says here also at 9:55 hours, altitude changed to 2,950 feet, encountering strong turbulence again. And I see I'm missing some papers here, so what I'm going to do, I am going to recite the rest of the diary after my memory. I am still missing the papers. Evidently, that went somewhere. Maybe it's in the control room. But either way, what happened there is when he flew towards the pole, the compass was totally worthless. And after a while, somebody came on the radio and talked to him. Tell him not to be alarmed. And he told him that he is in good hands. And he would come back with them because they needed to talk to him. And also, in the diary that we have a book of here, which we can show on the screen, in fact, show it both to the public and in the control room, so I can see how we're doing. What is happening is that I looked out the window and he saw two, as it is written in the military transcript, is that it's two flying machines that a bubble on top, and it was discus shaped with an edge around it. And he was very puzzled and he was very alarmed. They told him that they would take control of his airplane and they would bring him to a landing. And after a while, he found out very quickly that his controls did not work and the engines quit. When you're in a twin-engine airplane and the engines quit, you're becoming a glider. That's bad news. But the engines quit, but he's still flying. There were one of these crafts on each side of his airplane. And what happens then is that he just leans back and they are taking him to a place in a field. There is no snow, there is tropical terrain, there is forests underneath, and they're taking pictures as they're going along. They're taking pictures of animals that looks very large, mammoth-looking animals. And they also see vegetation on the ground that looks totally green. There is no snow or anything. When they get to the destination, they are let down. They are put down on the ground, a very soft landing, straight down. The two saucers, I guess, discus-shaped crafts on the side, they also landed. And somebody came up to the aircraft and they talked to him in English, let him know that he needed to come with them. And when he did, they started to walk towards a little platform. That platform was hovering off the ground about 2 feet. They got on the platform and sat down in some chairs, and one of them had a control mechanism, so they were heading towards the city close by, or a town. I didn't say how big it was. When they got into town, they were taken up to a building, and they walked up to the building, and when they came up to the door did not open this way, it went up into the ceiling or above. They walked in, and they walked into a long corridor, and they walked into a room where there was an older gentleman sitting in a chair there by a table waiting for them. He welcomed Admiral Byrd, and he started to speak to him. And he told him that, do not be alarmed. He says, we are here, we are your friends. But I have some information for you that you need to take back to your race. The language in the report was used, your race, even though they looked the same. The guy behind the table that met them was also a white person, though he was a little taller than Admiral Byrd. Admiral Byrd was about 6 foot. Now, he said that we have been watching your nations on the surface, and we have been very alarmed since you exploded the first atomic bomb over Hiroshima and Nagasaki. We have been watching. And we see that you have reached a fork in the road, which is very close to a point of no return. We have to warn you that if you continue on the path that you are going, you will destroy yourself. You need to take this information that I give you to your leaders, because you are a person of high integrity and you are very well known on the surface world. Therefore, we have chosen you to bring this message back. And we are allowing you again to leave this place to go back. They had a long conversation, about 30 minutes, and he explained to them what the future of our civilizations would be if things went wrong. Back then, they didn't have as good an understanding of what really nuclear war would be, but it fit pretty well the way they explained it. Nuclear winter, totally destruction of basically all mankind, because of the radioactivity back then was much harsher than it is on radioactivity right now. Now they have totally actually clean nuclear weapons. Of course, they don't want to use those. The others are much better for the type of purpose they intended it for. And now he was there. He was talking to him. He wasn't asking too many questions, because the guy behind the table that met him there, he did most of the talking. It was pretty much that guy talking and Admiral Byrd listening deal. He told him that he was going to be sent back with full memory of what had happened there. And he needed to tell the people and the leaders on the surface that things are going off a cliff. That's my language. And there is nothing we can do about it unless we change our ways. So when he left, he went back on the platform, and they went back to the aircraft. When he came back, the engines was already running, and the airplane was sitting there. They got in the airplane, and they were lifted straight up again by the same two crafts on their side. And they was taken in a northerly direction towards the hole at the North Pole. And as it says in the transcript from the military report, they were going very fast. Well, they didn't say anything about how fast, because evidently the instruments did not work, because they must have been inside a bubble or something, where the air inside the bubble was traveling with them, so it did not affect the pitot tube to give you an airspeed indication. They got him outside, out through the hole, and back towards base camp. And at one point they felt like they suddenly started falling, and then the controls worked again, and they were flying. And then on the radio there came a last message to them saying, basically, have a good trip. I forget what the language was. And they spoke in German, Auf Wiedersehen. So there is a German connection here somewhere. When they came back to base camp, he had it pretty much written down, and he came back and he was taken to the high command of the military, and it was debriefed, and they told Admiral Byrd that he was under no circumstances at any time, now or in the future, to talk about his experience there to anybody. And Admiral Byrd, he said in his diary that he was a military man. He said he had to obey the order. But later on he wrote this story down so that after his death or close to it, it could be released. I know this sounds very wild. It's hard to believe. I'm even struggling with it. But there is something here that is worth looking into. You know, the same old thing goes with old myths and legends from thousands of years ago. Mythology. There is always something behind the mythology, though it is mostly twisted around to some other end or means that don't really relate to the original story, but there is something there. And that's something that we should be looking at. I have some pictures that the people in the control room give me the high sign to make sure that everything is okay for the pictures. So I need to see this on the camera, on the TV in the studio also, so I see how far along we are. The next photo coming up is one that was taken. It's a picture of a NASA print of the hole at the North Pole. And this hole is some 700 miles radius, and it is taken by the SR-7 satellite on November 23rd, 1968, and there's almost no cloud cover. And you can see the hole at the North Pole going into the interior. It is so clear that it is not even open for discussion. There is something there that shows a hole at the North Pole. And this is a NASA print taken by the SR-7 satellite, 32,000 miles out into space, straight down towards the Earth. And again, let me see also this picture in the studio. I need to see it in the studio also. The next photo that I want to bring up is another picture that again is taken by the SR-3 satellite. The SR-3 satellite was taken on, this picture was taken January 6, 1967. And this also shows a darkening at the North Pole. And this is picture number 4 that I have in the stack. You can see that there is no snow, there is nothing at the North Pole. Now this is purported as evidence to the fact that there is a hole at the North Pole. I think the last picture is more of an evidence than this one is, because this one here, remember, it's taken in January 6th. That is in the middle of the winter. Also remember, there's very little sunlight at the North Pole. So this could be that the sunlight is blocked out. So I think for the evidence more so, we should be looking at the last one that really showed the clear circle of the North Pole. Now, when you ask NASA about these prints, you ask them, what is it? Well, they said, gee, we don't really know, we don't have any explanation, we don't want to comment on it. Except that the lens of the photo camera that took the picture has a circle in the middle of it because the lens is attached. It shows a peripheral photo. That is the story we got. Well, folks, how do you know when a bureaucrat lies to you? His lips move, right? Let's show the next picture again. That is the South Pole, taken by the same satellite. You can see the snow cover over the South Pole region, and there is no hole in the middle. This is the SR-7 satellite also, takes it at the same altitude, 32,000 miles into space. There is no hole. Though there is a hole there, but it's much smaller. You cannot see it from 32,000 miles out. So, they lied. There is no peripheral lens. It is a complete lens that takes a picture as is, and it does show the hole at the North Pole as we showed you the first one. Now remember I said there is a German connection, because when he left they said Auf Wiedersehen, which means goodbye. We will see you again. Now that might not make a lot of sense to a lot of people, but during the Second World War and before, the Germans were experimenting with flying disc-looking aircraft. And the thing about it is that they made some that flew. In fact, at the end of the Second World War, the records that was captured by the Allied forces show there were 263 known flying discs that were built by the German Empire. all the way from the Creole all the way up to the Haunebu 1, 2, 3. In fact, they also had a space station that they built. The Haunebu aircraft, there you see, this is a prototype of a German flying saucer, disc, whatever you want to call it. The top model was built by a German, actually he's from Austria. His name was Victor Schauberger. He was a scientist, and he was experimenting with electrogravity. The records show that he built a model that could fly without engines, without fuel. It was based on an anti-gravity system. And he had a meeting with Hitler. He sent a message through a high-ranking military officer to Hitler saying that the way that this world is going is that we need a new system of power. And I think I have what you need for propulsion. And Hitler, he agreed to meet with him. There was a meeting between Hitler and several of his generals. Victor Schauberger came and he had the drawings. He had the specifications on this flying disc. And he had a model with him that he left outside. Once he had explained what the craft can do, they all walked outside and they test flew the model. After the test flight, they walked inside, and Hitler turned to his generals and he said, and I think I'll almost quote this, "Do you believe this is a good thing?" And one of the generals answered that, "Yes, I believe so. I think we need it." And Hitler told him, "Do it." And he turned around and he walked out. From there on, I almost said it is history. Well, it is kept out of history, but the facts and the papers, I have a videotape at home that show these flying discs that Hitler built. They're flying around. In fact, they come up so close you can almost reach out and touch them. It is real. Now, where that connection comes in with the people inside the North Pole in 1947, I am not sure. Because also at one point in the conversation with the man behind the desk inside the North Pole, Admiral Byrd was told that the ships was called Flugelrads. That is exactly the same name that the German High Command and the German officers called their flying discs. Kugelrads. There is a connection there, and right now I'm not about to say that. Now, if it was in the South Pole, in the Neue Schwabenland area, then there is a connection. That's where the German flying saucers ended up, at the German base at the South Pole. Now, there is more evidence to the fact that flying saucers are real. In fact, the American government believe they are because they have granted patents on them. The next photo I have for you show a patent that is issued by the United States Patent Office. The patent number is up in the right-hand corner of the picture. And the guy that invented it, his name is G.A. Hill. The patent is called that is an ionized boundary layer fluid pumping system. And that creates a flow of air and ions over the surface. The ions pick up the air and you create a flow of air over the surface, which in an aerodynamic system will create lift and the thing comes off the ground. If we bring that up just a little bit, we will see the well, kind of like saucer-looking thing underneath on the same photo, on the same picture. Let's show that also, because that shows more like it's there you go. There's a craft, and this is this patent is granted in June 25, 1963. It's an ionized boundary layer fluid pumping system. And let's go to the next one. That is just as interesting, if not more. This pattern is also by G.A. Hill, and it's pattern number 3,095,163. This aircraft that he built a model of flew without any engines, because the wings of this aircraft had this electronic, they had bars in it towards, from the trailing to the leading edge of the wing. They picked up free electrons at the leading edge of the wing, and electronically they ran them back over the wing and spit them out at the back end. When you get electrons moving that fast, almost the speed of light coming across the wing, create a phenomenal flow of air that is being dragged along those electrons. When you get air coming from the front to the back of the wing, over the top, and going under the bottom, then what happens? You get lift on the wing. So the aircraft lifts off. And of course, when you have it on the tail, you tip the tail up, you start sliding forward. So you get a forward motion on the aircraft. This aircraft was one of the early models that he built. Later on, he built actually a flying saucer that he had remote control. He was flying around in the desert here in Arizona. And of course, you know, feds found out about it, so they came and confiscated the whole thing and told him that if he ever talked about it again, he'll be killed. That was the end of that one. Standard procedure. But this was a patent that was granted by the U.S. Patent Office that shows that, yes, there are other ways than fuel, diesel fuel, or gasoline to fly an airplane. Here is another photo that shows how the crust of the Earth may be. Let's look at that for just a little bit. Show this picture where you see there may be a central sun, because otherwise how would we get that yellowish, lightly brown light coming out, straight out from the North Pole? It says here the hollow earth, and it says Agartha. That is supposed to be the name of the continent on the northern continent of the inside and the hollow earth. You see also the different, on the right side and on the left side, through the crust there are canals going from the surface into the interior. Where some of those openings are, there is one in Mount Shasta. There is one coming from the Cheops pyramid going down to the interior of the earth. And there's supposed to be one down in Kentucky in one of the coal mines down there that they found that they were, well, they closed it up, but it's supposed to be a tunnel going to the interior. There's supposed to be also an interior tunnel from the Himalayas somewhere going in, and probably somewhere in the South Americas also. This is somewhat verified by old papers that dates back to the Rama Empire in India, where they talk about the tall golden people coming out of the earth and going back into the center of the earth. Again, which coincide with one of the transcripts from the report of one of the chambers was when they broke into one of the chambers in one of the pyramids. I think it was the Cheops pyramid. They broke into the room, and there was light in the room, because on one of the tables in a dish there was a crystal standing on end, in that dish standing on end, and the crystal was lit up. And in the room they saw a man of gold, is what they said, a golden man that ran out through an opening in the back and down a corridor. They went after him, but they didn't want to go in. They didn't know about booby traps or anything, so they let it go. Later on they went down there and there was nothing in there. This is in the transcripts from the digging or undigging of that tomb. And of course that makes you think. maybe we're not alone on Earth of having a hollow planet. I also have a picture that was a NASA print that shows that Mars might be the same way. Let's show that photo also. You can see at the very top of the planet Mars, which is kind of reddish, just like Mars is supposed to be. At the top, you can see there's snow or something white on the outside. We will assume it is snow. And then at the very top, you can see a hole. And especially on the one down at the bottom there, you can see there's a hole, there's a shadow right at the top. And also at the top one, you can see there's snow on the inside of that hole up there. But there's a definite hole at the top. I wonder if Elmo is able to zoom in on that hole. That's on the lower one. I wonder if that's possible. If we were able to zoom in on that, I tell you, you would definitely see that there is an opening going in there. It's clear as a bell. In fact, that's not even open for discussion. It's right there for everybody to see it. And when you look at something like that, you start wondering, you know, what is going on? There's a hole at the top on Mars. If you look at the moon here, looks like there's one there too. And of course we have the NASA print showing the hole at the North Pole of Earth. Something is going on here. I also mentioned the moon. I didn't bring a picture of the hole at the moon. It can kind of be seen. It is not really a clear one, but you can see it. There is a hole there. It's much smaller. But there's one there. But I do have another picture of something on the moon. This is a photocopy of a NASA print showing 3 pyramids on the moon. Now when NASA is confronted with this one, they just shrug the other shoulder and say, well, gee, you know, I don't know where this one comes from. Well, it comes from NASA. Though I have seen a copy of that NASA print, and I had a copy of it, though I loaned it out to someone that was going to make more copies of it, and I never got it back. But this is the copy of the NASA print showing the pyramids on the moon. In fact, it showed up on the front cover of a book. The title of the book is Our Spaceship Moon. Our Spaceship Moon. It's out of print. You may find it in a used bookstore. They made quite a few of them over the last many years up to now, but they're out of print. I also am going to throw in another one that's got nothing to do with the hollow earth or anything like that, but it's such an astounding picture that I'm going to throw it anyway. It is also a NASA print from the moon showing a 2-mile-long cigar-shaped ship floating across the surface, throwing a shadow on the ground. Now this is extraordinary. And the plate number and the information on it is right underneath of it there. This is a 2-mile-long cigar-shaped mothership floating across the surface of the moon. And you can see the shadow of it flowing on the ground. Look down, the crater underneath the tip of it there. Look down into the crater. Where is the shadow? It's on the right side, right? It goes down at a little bit of an angle on the back. You can see that inside the crater. You can see the shadow on the right side. See sunlight on the left side. Now let's show that picture again. I'm going to show you something here. If you look on the mothership, the shadow on the ground is the same direction as it is inside the crater. Now that is important. There is something that is very close to the ground. That mothership is not up high. It is very close to the ground because the shadow is probably about the same distance above the ground as the depth of that crater, because it is kind of like the same angle and the same amount of shadow. And I had another picture that I also got many, many years ago. And this picture is so clear that it is worth showing, even though it may not have necessarily a connection to the hollow earth either. But here it is. It shows an alien body on an autopsy table being held by a military officer, and this is what the alien looked like. If you look at that, you're going to ask yourself, where in the world do these guys come from? So let's show that picture in here also. There's an Air Force or something officer in the background. There's a corpse of an alien body laying on the table on the side. You can see the big slanted eyes. It's a wide, very narrow nose and a small slit for a mouth. Evidently this guy was found in a crashed flying saucer or something. This photo I had that from about 10, 15 years. In 1997 it showed up in UFO magazine. Very, very unique, very interesting. And let me just go back to the North Pole and the fact that there may be a race or a people living inside the cavern at the North Pole. Some of you, those of you that is going through the education system to the point where you know a little bit about history and who discovered the North Pole, you know, that was Fridtjof Nansen. He was a Norwegian. Well, at least he thinks he discovered the North Pole. I have both his books that he wrote in 1913 or 14 after he came back. In those books, he talked about the fact that he was going straight towards the pole. And on the surface of the ice, there were yellow and red pollen from flowers. Pollen in the ice pack at the North Pole over 1,000 miles from the closest green speck of grass? Don't make sense. He also found dead bees, or actually they're frozen stiff, so to speak, bees laying on the ice. Does that make sense? 1,000 miles from the closest beehive? Also, there was sand blowing from the North Pole. In fact, on his second trip, he ended up turning around basically because of the sand, because so much sand they could hardly breathe. It's in his book, for those of you that may want to read it. If you know Norwegian, it'll be the real thing. Though when he came, he was going towards the pole. Here is something that is important. He was going towards the pole. He was working his sextant, trying to figure out how far he was north at all times. So he got from about 80 degrees, he went to the 81st degrees, he got to the 82nd degrees, he got to the 83rd degrees, and he got further north, he got to the 82nd degrees. Whoops, something happened here. He went to 82, 83, 82. That didn't make sense. So he went back. He got to 83 again, and he went straight back the other way, and he said, oh, now I'm back to 82 again. He said, something screwy here. So he went back again, and he went going back and forth from 82, 83, 83, 82, 80, back and forth. And he said, this is really wrong. He says, there is no other way. We have to be at the North Pole. When the instruments are malfunctioning as they are, I declare this to be the North Pole. And he did. Planted the flag, and he said he was at the North Pole. Then he went home. 83 degrees. That's the absolute furthest north he could find. Okay, how much is left to the North Pole if he only went to the 83rd degrees? 7 degrees, right? If you take 7 degrees, divide that into 90, and you equate that to miles, that is equal to the 700-mile wide hole at the North Pole. That confirms the NASA print of the hole at the North Pole. There is another piece of information that is essential. That was written up in a science manual by a NASA official. And he said that Earth's orbit around the sun is a puzzle because it should not be. Why did he say that? Because we know how big the sun is. We know how much gravity the sun puts out to hold all the planets in place in the different locations and the distances. We know how big the Earth is. 23,000 miles around. So, just shy of 7,000 miles across. By using that size, multiplying it by the weight of rock, you come up with the total amount of pounds or tons that the Earth weighs. Okay? We know our distance to the sun. Now, we also know how much gravity the sun puts out. The sun is not putting out gravity to hold the whole weight of Earth in its present orbit around the sun. If Earth was solid, it should be at a distance much further out in the solar system, in fact, beyond Pluto, where it could be orbiting, because there the weight of Earth will be equal to the amount of gravity that the sun puts out. Technically, Earth cannot have this orbit as the third rock around the sun if it is solid, according to that NASA official. But he says, we're not worrying about it because there are still things in science we do not understand. Oh shit, Sherlock. That is right. There's things you don't understand, because maybe somebody above you in the organization are aware of the hole at the North Pole, but there's something there that makes up the difference of that weight to the distance and the gravity ratio. Another thing that kind of talks to the fact that there's something going on at the North Pole is that about the year 800, there was established a Viking colony on Greenland. And there was a lot of commerce going back and forth from Norway, from Denmark, through Iceland to Greenland. The Vikings traveled back and forth all the time. They even went back to the American continent. They had established a colony up in the the northern Canada called Vinland, Wineland in English. So, this is a fact. That is in the old Viking writings. Leif Erikson is the one that first made it to the Americas over 1,000 years ago. Columbus didn't do it. But this colony on Greenland, they were there. They thrived and they flourished for 400 years. But in about the year 1200, they lost contact with them. And the Eskimos on Iceland, they said that there were one time, one of the Vikings said that they left and they're leaving and going to the north because they found a land in the north where there is green grass, tall trees, and animals. And they picked up everything they had and they left to the north. That's the story that the Eskimos are telling. Very interesting, because the Vikings also have similar stories of people that live in the north. Remember, I read the Viking history. I grew up in Norway. It is all there. So happened that I got a few calls here. Let me take the first one just for the fun of it. Hello, caller, are you with us?
Yeah.
Hello there. What do you think about all this?
Um.
Well, that was pretty funny, wasn't it?
Yes. Hello?
Yeah, hello?
I have a question on where you're getting your sources from this. I mean, are most of these pictures and all the sources from the book, or where are you getting all these satellite pictures?
Much of it I'm getting from NASA themselves in their own publications. In fact, if you go on the internet, you can get those pictures right off the internet. That's where I got them, on Mars. Some of the NASA prints that I showed you, the NASA is not all that forthcoming with giving information out. Because of this, it's come somewhat embarrassing to them, because it's obvious that they've been lying to us. But on the other hand, there are several books out. One of them is The Smoky God. And of course, I can't zoom in on this one right now, but you can go to the different bookstores. You can get this one. It's written by William George Emerson. That explains that there was a Norwegian that accidentally, he ended up going in through the hole at the North Pole, and he described his stay in there. There's another book called The Hollow Earth. That is explained by someone that actually has been in there. And when it comes to the German flying saucers, there's pictures of them in here in UFOs, Conspiracies, Part 2. They show pictures of the German flying saucers. And there is a lot of information out there. Get on the internet and punch in word search on Hollow Earth, and you're going to get an earful.
Now, how big is this hole supposed to be?
Well, there is some controversy to the answer to that one. The picture that the SS-7 satellite took shows that it's the radius of 700 miles. Actually, I think I said that wrong earlier. Radius of 700 miles, that's 1,400 miles across.
Wow.
And that is a little bit too big for them to hide. That's why you hardly ever see pictures of the North Pole on TV. And
yeah, now, how would it be that nobody has come across this yet? And I mean, wouldn't you think, like, wouldn't you feel that, like, somebody would have discovered this by now?
Oh, somebody has. Admiral Byrd did, and he was shut up.
Well,
Anybody that's come
think
up,
how many people are in the world, and then just one person found it?
There's more people. They've written books about it. Some people has gotten in there. Fishermen, I ran into fishermen in the northern part of Norway that say they've been in that region and they've seen the steady northern light. But I tell you though, get on the internet and research this, and you're going to find some very, very credible information.
All right. Well, I thank you for taking my phone call.
You betcha.
Bye-bye.
Well, I tell you, we're down to the bone here. We're about 1 minute left of the show, and I hope you enjoyed it, because I sure did. Since I didn't have a guest tonight, I figured I'll give you an earful of stuff that you wouldn't hardly believe unless you heard it on TV, right? Well, don't take my word for it. I'm just one guy. I'm a digger. I have been able to prove it to myself through another method that maybe someday I will talk about. But for right now, I can't. But this is something here that you should look into. And if you want to go there, get to the northern tip of Greenland, get in an airplane, fly north for about 3 hours, you'll see it, and come back. You have seen it. Thank you very much for watching. And Admiral Byrd's diaries can be gotten from Inner Light Publications, Box 753, New Brunswick, New Jersey, 08903. Thank you for watching. This is The Hidden Truth. We'll be here next week, same time, same place, same channel. Good night.